Many of you will have read, or possibly have had read to you, the stories of Winnie the Pooh and his companions in 100 Acre Wood. Piglet, little pig, Tigger, the bouncing tiger, Eeyore, and others, Roo and Rabbit, Kanga. They're little stories that capture something of the beauty and blessings of friendship. And one of those stories, little Piglet is trapped high in his home by rising floodwaters. It's been raining for days, and the water is up to the window high in the tree where he lives in 100 Acre Wood, and alone and afraid and longing for company and a surprise friend, he says, "It's a little anxious to be a very small animal surrounded by water. I wish Pooh were here. It's so much more friendly with two. It's so much more friendly with two." And those feelings of loneliness and the desire for company, for the help and support of a friend, they resonate with us, don't they? They're feelings that all of us here this morning can readily identify with. We don't have to think too far back to 2020, whenever we were forced into lockdown and we were cut off, remember, from family and friends, and you can remember those feelings of separation and isolation and anxiety that we felt, the longing for company, to share experiences, to do life again with people. Now, why is that? Because, as we saw last week, it's the way we've been made. We're not made to be isolated individuals. We're made, as the heading for this series tells us, we are made for more, much more. We're created for friendship. We're told in Genesis chapter 1, that passage that we read at the start of our service, that in making us, God made us in his image. He made us like him. And being a relational God, a God who engages in relationships both within the Godhead itself and with others, being made in the likeness of God means that we are made for relationships, made to be relational, with an innate and inner desire and need for companionship, connection, friendship. We've been created with both the capacity and the need for friendship with God, as we saw last week, and with others, other people. On creating Adam in Genesis chapter 2, the second passage we read in Genesis, there he was, Adam, perfect and sinless though Adam was, and enjoying a completely perfect relationship with Almighty God. God said there was something wrong. Up until that point, everything in creation, good, 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 good. Looked at Adam alone and he said, this isn't good. There's something wrong here. Created for friendship, created for relationship, Adam was alone. He'd been made with a capacity and a need for human companionship, and there was no one there in the world to fulfill that need within Adam. And one of the reasons that God created Eve for Adam, one of the reasons he created marriage, one of the reasons he created community, one of the reasons he created the church was to meet this need within every one of his people for companionship, friendship. And having created us with this need, he provides the very means whereby that need would be met. And he commands his people, he commands us today to meet this need in our fellow Christians. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, where in the Bible does God command us to be friends? To be friends with one another, to meet one another's need for friendship? Well, that's part of what Jesus is commanding here in John chapter 15, where he commands us to love one another. He places this command, as we saw last week, within the context of friendship. He says in verse 14, you're my friends. You're my friends. And as I said last week, that word friend comes from the Greek word for philos, friend. It has its root in the verb phileo, a verb which means to love, to show affection towards. A friend is someone who we show love to. So Jesus is saying, I have loved you as friends, and you're to love one another as friends. You're to love one another as I have loved you, a love that involves loving one another as friends. That's something. It's not all that he's saying in this command, but it's something of what Jesus is saying in this command. He is telling us to show friendship, to give ourselves as friends to one another. And Jesus does more than simply command us to be friends. He shows us what that friendship is to look like, the kind of friends we're to be. He says, love one another as I have loved you. Love one another as I have loved you. He says, be the friend that I have been to you. Show the friendship that I have shown you. And this morning we're going to consider the friendship that Jesus commands of us here as his people. Friendship with one another, friendship between Christians. We've looked at friendship with God. We're looking at friendship with one another. And our final sermon in this series, we'll be looking at friendship with the world, those who aren't believers. And we're going to consider this friendship this morning under 4 basic headings. The blueprint for Christian friendship, the building blocks of Christian friendship, the barriers to Christian friendship, finally, the blessings to Christian friendship. Firstly, the blueprint for Christian friendship. This is the longest of our points. The final 3 points will be a little bit brief, well, quite a lot briefer. The blueprint for Christian friendship. Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. He's saying here, I am the blueprint. I am the pattern for how you're to love one another as friends. And from Christ's blueprint, from the example that he commands us to follow, we're given a number of fundamental lessons, foundational lessons about friendship. Firstly, the inclusivity of friendship. The inclusivity of friendship. Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. Engage in friendship just as I have. And in that we have a lesson that we could very easily overlook and miss. Jesus engaged in friendships, not only showing friendships, but receiving friendships, enjoying friendship. In his perfect, sinless humanity, Jesus recognized his need for friendship. And if Jesus, in his perfect, sinless humanity, needed human friendship, the blessings of friendship, then we all do. Now, maybe you're sitting there this morning and you're thinking to yourself, well, Nathan, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not a people person. I'm perfectly happy on my own. I don't have this need for deep personal connections with other people. Jesus says to us in this verse, he says, love one another, enter into friendships as I did. You need, and therefore you're to develop friendships. This need is all-inclusive. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, yeah, I see what you're saying, but I'm married. And I get the blessings of friendship from my spouse. I don't need any friendship beyond my husband or my wife. Well, some of Jesus' disciples were married. Peter had a mother-in-law, so clearly he was married. And by drawing married men into his friendship and telling them to go and show similar friendship, he was teaching that we need friendships even beyond our marriage partners or spouses. To look only to your spouse to meet your need for friendship is to place on them a burden which is too heavy for one person to carry. This need is all-inclusive. But maybe you're unmarried. Quite a number in our congregation who are unmarried. And longing for deep, meaningful friendship, you might think to yourself, it can only be found in marriage. And if you remain unmarried, well, then I'm destined never to experience the deep, meaningful friendship and blessings of deep, meaningful, satisfying friendship that is only found in marriage. Well, again, Jesus' example and command show us that deep, meaningful, satisfying friendship can and should exist outside of marriage. And the church is to be a place where this friendship is shown and enjoyed. Sadly and sinfully, on occasions, the church has elevated marriage and it has shunned and sidelined singles. It has relegated singles within the church to second-class Christians, when the church is to be a place where everyone enjoys the soul-satisfying friendships that we were created to enjoy. That's what the church is to be. That brings us to another aspect of the inclusivity of Christian friendship. Not only is it to be inclusive in the sense that we all need it, it's also inclusive in the sense that we are all to show it. Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. He doesn't say, those of you who are so inclined to show this friendship, those of you who have a propensity towards friendship, those of you who are particularly extroverted and outgoing, love one another as I have loved you. He gives it as a blanket command to all of his people. He says, as I engaged in friendship, you too are to engage in friendships. It's not a command we're free to opt out of. It's all inclusive. And not only is Christian friendship inclusive in the sense that we all need it and we're all to show it, it's also inclusive in the sense of who we're to show it to. Jesus says, love one another. Love one another. He doesn't say love those disciples who you get on best with. He doesn't say love those disciples who you most like and you find it easy to be friends with. He says love one another as I have loved you. Now think about the disciples for a moment. They were a diverse bunch of men, weren't they? You know, some were towny, some were rural, some were blue collar, some white collar. At least one was a zealot who wanted Israel freed from Roman. At least another was a tax collector who collaborated with the Roman authorities and collected taxes for them. Diverse bunch of men. And among the 12 of them, there were a whole range of personalities. Some were strong, some were forceful, some were shy and retiring. Some were confident to the point of overconfident, while some, like Thomas, were quite timid. And Jesus befriended them all. Jesus befriended them all. There were none left friendless on the fringes with Jesus. In fact, Jesus showed himself to be particularly concerned and drawn to those who were on the fringes. And he tells us to do the same. He says, love one another as I have loved you. No fellow believer is to be left outside the circle of our friendship. That's one of the obvious features of the companions in 100 Acre Wood. Scattered, if you read any of the stories, you'll remember scatterbrained Winnie the Pooh, energetic Tigger. There's anxious little Piglet. There's grumpy Eeyore, maternal Kanga, wise old owl, slightly less wise, in fact, not wise at all, little Rabbit. But yet there they all are operating together in a close-knit community of friendship. No one left out. All very different, yes, but no one left out. No one excluded in the fringes. That's the inclusive nature of Christian friendship. A crowd of people or a community of people can be one of the loneliest places in the world when everyone else is a friend. It can be one of the loneliest places in the world when everyone else is a friend. That should never, ever be the case within the church for anyone. For anyone. Sadly, on occasions, it is. It should never be the case for anyone within the church. And if that's your experience today, you're looking out at whether it's this congregation, I hope it's not, you look out at this congregation or beyond, and you're saying, everyone else is a friend but me. Remember this. Friendship isn't only something we all need, it's something we all need to show, something we're all called to show. So seek to gain friends, first of all, by being a friend. Rather than receiving this friendship, showing this friendship. Be a friend. Look for someone who you can be a friend to and show them the friendship that Jesus would have you show them. The inclusivity of Christian friendship. We all need it. Boy, oh boy, do we all need it. We're all to show it, and we're to show it to everyone. Second thing we see from Jesus' blueprint for Christian friendship is the variety of Christian friendship. The variety of Christian friendship. Jesus says, love as I have loved you. Engage in friendships just in the same way that I have. Well, how did Jesus then engage in friendships? Well, he engaged in a variety of friendships. Friendships that varied in depth, in intimacy, and in duration. He befriended the crowds that flocked to him, giving something of himself and his time to the crowds. From those who followed him, he chose 12 men to develop a particular friendship and relationship with. From those 12, he chose 3, Peter, James, and John, to be his best friends. From those 3, John was his BFF, his best forever friend. The Gospels, John is described as the disciple Jesus loved. A variety of friendships, variety of depths, intimacy, and duration. Outside those disciples, he had other friendships. Martha, Mary, Lazarus, for example, who he was close to and he loved. A variety of friendships. And that's our blueprint. We're to have a whole variety of friendships that vary in depth, intimacy, duration. Lots of people with whom we're friendly, and we share our friendship with, we engage with in Christian friendship, but others with whom we are closer. We engage in more intimate and increasingly meaningful friendships. As Jesus was, we have to be thoughtful and we have to show wisdom in how we interact in this variety of friendships, particularly whenever we're in a group setting. You know, whenever Jesus was with the crowds, he didn't just focus on his disciples and these 12 men and ignore the crowds. Whenever he was with his 12 disciples, he didn't sit over in the corner with Peter, James, and John and ignore the rest. Like Jesus, we're to develop closer and more intimate friendships, but also, like Jesus, we're to engage in those friendships without being cliquey, without being exclusive, without shutting others out. Of all the friends that Winnie the Pooh had, Piglet was the one he spent more time with. He shared most of his adventures with. But his interactions with Piglet did not inhibit or damage his friendships with that wider group of friends. That's how we're to interact within this variety of friendships within the church. The inclusivity, the variety. The third thing we see from Jesus' blueprint is the core of Christian friendship. The core of Christian friendship. What is at the core? What is at the heart of friendship? What's a friend? What is friendship? Well, it's love, isn't it? We've covered that already. The word friend comes from the Greek word, which means to love, to show affection. That's what friendship is. That's what is at the heart of any friendship, showing love. And Jesus says of us, love one another as I have loved you. That love, Jesus' love, is to be the love which is to be at the heart of our Christian friendships. Think of the love that he showed his disciples. Sacrificial, self-giving, costly, persistent, patient love. That's the core. That's what's involved in Christian friendship, showing this Christ-like love. What that involves, we're going to think about shortly. But that's the core of Christian friendship. Giving and receiving, sacrificial, self-giving, friend-surfing love. And if that's not the core of your relationship with someone, your relationship is simply about passing time together in a mutual hobby or interest. You meet someone to drink coffee or to watch football or to play golf or whatever. Yeah, it may be an enjoyable way to spend time, and it may be beneficial in lots of ways, but it's not Christian friendship. It's not the Christian friendship that Christ calls us to, and we're to seek to develop with one another if this love is not present within it. The blueprint for Christian friendship. Its inclusivity, its variety, and its core. The second thing we see here in Jesus' friendship is the building blocks of Christian friendship. The building blocks of Christian friendship. And as I said, the first point was longer. These next final three, are considerably shorter. The building blocks of Christian friendship. The core, as I said, of Christian friendship is love. But what does that practically involve? What does it demand of us, this love? Well, in Jesus' friendship, we see some of the building blocks of Christian friendship, things that, in following Jesus' example, we were to implement within our friendships. And we're going to focus on just four of them: involvement, input, grace, and God-centeredness. Firstly, involvement. Jesus' friendships with his disciples entailed involvement. He involved himself in their lives, and he enabled them to involve themselves in his. That meant time, carving out time in his busy schedule in order to devote to them and to their needs, time in which he could have been doing any number of other things. But he gave that time to his friends to be present, to build relationship, to speak into their lives, to support them in any number of ways, to be involved. The first building block of Christian friendship. Listen, it's a building block without which any meaningful friendship will be built. First building block of Christian friendship is that of involvement, committing yourself, giving yourself, and some of this precious, finite resource of yours, that of time, to be present in the lives of those with whom you're seeking to establish a deepening friendship, and opening yourself to enable them to be really involved in yours. It's basic. You know, it sounds so simple, but it's foundational. Friendship requires involvement. The second building block of Christian friendship we see in Jesus' example is that of input. Input. You know, Jesus didn't spend time with his friends simply to while away the time in pleasant conversation. You know, drinking coffee, chatting about the football results, talking about the failures of Roman government and what they were doing in Palestine. Though those things are part and parcel of our friendships. But he set aside time, he involved himself in their lives so that he might have an input in their lives and they might have an input in his. Input that included practical support, emotional support, spiritual help in all manner of situations in which his friends found themselves. Input that involved giving advice, giving guidance, giving wisdom. Input on occasions that involved expressing his concern about things they were doing. You know, remember when the disciples were arguing over who was the greatest? When James and John were vying for position within Christ's kingdom, and he voiced his concern, he challenged their thought process. Input will involve on occasions correction and rebuke, sometimes quite serious, very serious correction and rebuke. Remember his words to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Words spoken to his friend Peter. His friendship was practical. It had a purpose to provide input in all manner of ways into the lives of his friends and to receive their input into his. It's one of the building blocks of Christian friendship. Practical, meaningful input in all kinds of ways in the lives of our friends and their input in ours. Friendship involves input. The third building block of Christian friendship we see in Jesus' example is grace. Grace. Jesus' friends treated him appallingly at times. Appallingly. They disregarded his teaching, they ignored his counsel, and in his hour of need, they abandoned him and denied him, leaving him to face the cross alone. They treated him appallingly. Friendship with these men for Jesus and friendship with anyone for us involves grace. Showing grace whenever we're hurt, whenever we're offended, whenever we're sinned against by our friends. Grace in challenging those hurts and those wrongs in a gracious way. Grace to forgive and move on. We live in a sinful world. We're sinful people, all of us, and every human relationship and interaction is tainted in some way by sin. We should expect to be wronged. We should expect in our interactions to be hurt on occasions. We should expect to be offended within our human interactions. And real friendship, Christian friendship, involves showing grace, forgiveness in those occasions. The final building block of Christian friendship that I want to think about today is that of God-centeredness. God-centeredness. Jesus involved himself in the lives of his disciples in order to point them to God, in order to help them in their walk with God. To that end, he taught them. He shared with them. He discussed and explained God's word with them. He prayed both with and for them. And that's to be one of the building blocks of our Christian friendships. And that doesn't mean the only thing we do with our Christian friends is to talk about God or have Bible study and pray. But there should be a Godward, a spiritual dimension to our friendships, a readiness to ask each other about our walk with God. How's your Christian life? How are you getting on your prayer life? What are you reading through at the minute in God's Word? Are you reading any good Christian books lately? There should be a readiness to admit our struggles in that, our temptations, to seek prayer and help in those things that we're struggling with. Because without that, our friendships are no different from our friendships with the world. They're no different from our friendships with non-Christians, are they? Christian friendships and having a Christian friendship should mean a God-centeredness within that friendship. The building blocks of Christian friendship: involvement, input, grace, and God-centeredness. Thirdly, that brings us to the barriers for Christian friendships. Thought about the blueprint, thought about the building blocks. Thirdly, the barriers to Christian friendships. This morning, we don't have time to do anything other than mention some of the things that prevent us from seeking and developing these kinds of real, meaningful, satisfying friendships. But some of the barriers are these: our sinfulness, our sinful nature, our selfishness, our tendency to focus on ourselves, my needs, my wants, what I can get out of this relationship rather than the needs of others. A spirit of individualism, which is culture. I don't need anyone. I don't want anyone. Who are you to engage yourself in my life? I don't need your input in my life. Thank you very much. Busyness, laziness, We're not prepared to put in the time and effort to develop meaningful friendships. Maybe a fear of being let down, you've been hurt in the past by a friend, and you're thinking, well, if I engage with this person to the same level I was before, well, I might get hurt. Social media, a temptation to think that the 300, 400 friends that you have on your social media account are real, meaningful friendships rather than the shallow interaction that they are. And we get confused between that and real, meaningful friendships. That's some of the barriers to Christian friendship. And Satan uses them in various combinations in our lives to stop us from developing Christian friendships and enjoying the blessings of those friendships. In the latest Mission Impossible film, I think it's the last one, the last Mission Impossible film that was released in March or April of this year, the enemy that the Impossible Mission Force is trying to overcome is a computer program called the Entity. The Entity. It has infiltrated every computer system across the globe. It is seeking to wipe out mankind by turning humans against each other. The Entity, turning us against each other. And in one scene, the hero, Ethan Hunt, who's played by Tom Cruise, he turns to his colleagues within the Impossible Mission Force and he says, the Entity is just scared and divided. The Entity wants us scared and divided. And that's exactly what Satan wants of us. He wants us scared and he wants us divided. He doesn't want us to enjoy the blessings of Christian friendship. He wants us scared and divided. He wants us lonely and afraid. And he uses all these barriers to that end. The barriers to Christian friendship. The blueprint, the building blocks, and the barriers. That brings us finally to the blessings. The blessings of Christian friendship. What are the blessings that God has designed friendship to bring to us? The blessings that Satan doesn't want us to enjoy, what are they? Well, again, we see the blessings of Christian friendship in Jesus' friendships. Blessings that are very closely tied to the building blocks we've already thought about. Firstly, the blessing of companionship. Companionship. Jesus and his disciples enjoyed mutual companionship through their friendship. And so do we. God has designed friendship to meet this deep inner need, desire, love, yearning for companionship, friendship, relationship. It's one of the blessings of Christian friendship, companionship. The blessing of support, physical, emotional, spiritual support in the host of circumstances that we face in life. They were the disciples. The support that they received through Jesus' friendship, we receive all kinds of support in and through our Christian friendships. The well-known song sung by a number of singers, but originally by Bill Withers, Lean on Me. It's a recognition and an offer of this blessing of friendship. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. God has designed Christian friendship as a means, one means of helping you to carry on, providing you with the support that you need to carry on. Companionship, support. Thirdly, the blessing of development. The blessing of development, growth, sanctification, developing characteristics in your life like patience, endurance, perseverance, stickability, likability, growing in grace, becoming more Christ-like through the influence and the input and the involvement of your friends. Piglet grew less anxious because of the friendship of an encouragement of Pooh, we develop and we grow in all kinds of ways through the input of friends. Companionship, support, and growth. Some of the blessings that we enjoy as we engage in friendships. Some of the blessings that God has designed friendships to bring to you. But another blessing that Christian friendships brings, and is designed to bring, is that it visualizes to the world, it displays and proclaims to the watching world something of the beauty of the gospel. It visualizes and displays and proclaims the gospel to a watching world. Everyone here, but not only here, everyone in Ballyclare, but not in Ballyclare, everyone in the world is longing for connection, longing for companionship, longing for friendship. It's what we do for. It's what we do for. Because of sin, we're lost, and we can no fully enjoy and experience. But we still long for it, don't we? We still yearn for it. Lost. Everyone for acceptance, connection, relationship, friendship. We see the longing just jumping out at us from our culture. The success of that long-running sitcom, Friends. Series after series, people sitting down and watching these 6 people interacting as friends. Does that not tell us something of our culture's longing for friends? The theme tune of that series, for you, for you, screams to us for someone, just someone to be there for us, for me, a friend. The Toy Story films, their theme tune, you've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. Again, it screams to us, our cultures, our societies long for friends. Someone for me. Everyone is longing for real, soul-satisfying, fulfilling friendship. And as we engage in the friendships that we are created to enjoy with Christ's people, we show to a watching world that it is possible to have those friendships we're created to enjoy. And we point a watching world to the person in whom it is possible, the one through whom we can have these friendships. Real connection, real meaning can be enjoyed. And it can be enjoyed, it can be experienced through Jesus and his friendship towards us. And so to that end, yes, to enjoy these blessings, the companionship and the support and the developments, but also to visualize to a watching world and proclaim to a watching world the gospel, then we need to take Christ's command seriously. We need to take it to heart, and we need to start giving ourselves to this sort of Christian friendship, to draw alongside people and say to them, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. To draw alongside people and say, I'll be there for you. You've got a friend in me. We started with Piglet, and we'll end with Piglet. There he was, stuck high in a tree, floodwaters rising, looking out his windows and saying, I wish Pooh were here. I wish Pooh were here. It's so much more friendly with 2. Who is saying of you today, I wish Nathan were here. I wish Jill were here. I wish George were here. I wish Gary was here. I wish Callum were here. I wish William were here. Because it's so much more friendly with them. That's a challenge to us today. Amen.